I never thought it would come to this. Me, sitting in a courtroom, watching my ex-wife's lawyer grin like he already won, and a judge lean in like I was a ticking bomb. That's how it started. Or, I guess, how it ended, depending on how you look at it. Melissa and I were married 16 years. We weren't perfect, but we were solid, or I thought we were. We had our routines. Our Friday night takeout, Sunday morning pancakes, her late night laptop glow while I graded papers at the kitchen table. She worked in marketing. She could sell anything. And I guess, in the end, that included a new version of herself. One without me in it. The divorce papers came on a Tuesday. Plain envelope. No warning. Just sitting on the kitchen counter like a bank statement. My name in bold. Her signature at the bottom. I stared at them for a long time, thinking maybe there was a note inside. A reason. There wasn't. 3 days later, she told me she wanted full custody of our son. That was the real punch. Tyler is 12. Quiet kid, sharp as hell. Loves baseball and Legos and anything with wires. He still laughs at my corny jokes, which is more than I can say for most people. And I've been there for every single day of his life. Melissa said I could still see him. That's how she phrased it, like I was applying for visiting hours. But supervised, monitored, scheduled. I asked why. She said, Dan, you've been different lately. Different how? Withdrawn. Depressed. You don't talk much. You go quiet when things get tense. That's not healthy for him. I thought maybe she was scared. Maybe she was overreacting. I told her I'd go to therapy. I offered mediation. That's when she said it. You're unstable. It wasn't a suggestion. It was a statement. Like a diagnosis. And it wasn't just her saying it anymore. It was her lawyer. His name was Vincent Cruz. Tall guy, slick hair, voice like velvet, and a smile you'd cross the street to avoid. First custody hearing. I showed up with a folder full of emails from Tyler's teachers, school report cards, photos from camping trips, letters from other parents vouching for me. Vincent showed up with a binder and a rehearsed tone. He talked about my emotional volatility. He said I had a history of retreating during conflict, that I displayed signs of internalized instability, whatever the hell that means. Then he pulled out something I didn't expect. My journal, a page torn out. My handwriting, a sentence I'd scribbled one night at 1 a.m. Some days I just feel like I'm disappearing. I froze. I hadn't even known she read it. Vincent held it up like a crime scene photo. Mr. Harper admits in his own words to feelings of hopelessness and disassociation. Is that someone we entrust with the emotional care of a developing child? My lawyer objected, said it was taken out of context. But I saw the judge lean forward. Then came the line that stuck. We're not here to demonize Mr. Harper, Vincent said with his softest smile. We're here to ask whether a child deserves to be the emotional anchor for a man still lost at sea. Melissa sat like she was at a job interview, composed, sympathetic. She wore pale colors, no makeup, her hands folded in her lap like she was praying for me. And then she looked at me, just once, and nodded. That tiny gesture, the nod, like she was agreeing with everything being said. Agreeing that I was broken. Agreeing that I shouldn't be allowed near my son without a clipboard and a chaperone present. The court liaison gave me a look I'll never forget. Not angry, not judgmental, just disappointed. Like I'd let everyone down and hadn't even noticed. And Tyler? He sat 2 rows back, next to a social worker, watching everything. He didn't speak, but he saw it all. She'd already been preparing him. 1 week before that hearing, she brought Tyler into the kitchen while I was folding laundry, still living under the same roof at that point. She crouched down beside him and said, loud enough for me to hear, "See how quiet Daddy gets when he's overwhelmed." Right in front of him, like I was some kind of case study. She didn't look at me when she said it, just waited for Tyler to nod, then smiled like she was teaching him something important. Some life lesson about how to spot weakness. I didn't say anything. I didn't fight back. Not yet. But I was paying attention. Every lie, every look, every piece of paper. A week later, she moved out, with Tyler, and into a townhouse across town. That's when I found out who helped her move. Jeremy. Jeremy was the school counselor at Tyler's middle school. Friendly guy. Always had jokes at parent-teacher nights. Once helped us organize a school fundraiser. Came over for dinner once, even. Sat in my kitchen. Now he was living in my house. Melissa swore it wasn't serious. It just happened, she said. But it didn't just happen. It had been happening. Long before the papers showed up. My son was living with my wife and the school counselor who replaced me. I didn't yell. I didn't slam any doors. I went back to my apartment, the one-bedroom unit that still smelled like paint and someone else's cooking, and sat on the floor for a long time. I remember the silence more than anything. And I remember what my lawyer said when I asked him if I had a shot. If it comes down to credibility, he said, we're outgunned. Then he paused. Unless something changes. It would. But not yet. Because the next time we stood in that courtroom, my son wasn't quiet. Not even close. But I'll get to that. After the first hearing, I didn't push back. No appeals, no objections, no dramatic speeches in court. I signed what needed signing and nodded when my lawyer suggested a follow-up evaluation. I let people believe I was settling into the role they'd written for me. Not unstable exactly, but defeated. She wanted full custody? Fine. Let them think I'd stopped fighting. That part didn't bother me as much as it should have. What bothered me was that Tyler had started pausing before calling me dad, like he was checking if it was still allowed. I followed the supervised visitation rules to the letter. Showed up early. Left exactly on time. Never tried to extend a visit or squeeze in an extra moment. The workers at the family center made polite conversation about weather and traffic while scribbling notes about my demeanor. I always made sure they saw me smiling. Never frustrated. Never sad. Just quiet. Friendly. Predictable. The first real shift came 3 weeks in, when Melissa tried to change our Saturday visit to Sunday due to a family event. That's what she called it. But the schedule, filed, signed, and approved, clearly stated weekends were mine. The school even had it on file. When she texted the principal to confirm Tyler would be with Jeremy that Saturday, the school forwarded the message to both our lawyers. The principal was confused. I wasn't. I said nothing. But that email went into my growing file. Melissa didn't say anything about it when I saw her the next week. No apology. No explanation. She stood at the curb like always, arms crossed, keys in hand, sunglasses on even though it was overcast. Jeremy stayed in the car. He didn't like to get out when I was there. That was fine. Tyler ran up, backpack bouncing, and handed me one of his sketch pads like it was nothing. Inside was a drawing of a small robot with legs made from pencils and a head shaped like an old alarm clock. But what caught my eye was what was sitting on the table in the corner of the drawing, a pair of car keys. Not just any keys. A fob with the exact same brand tag I'd seen on Jeremy's keychain back when he used to stop by our house. Underneath the sketch, Tyler had written, "This robot hears everything." I didn't mention it. I told him the drawing was awesome, asked him how the robot worked, and listened while he explained in detail how it could record voices and detect lies. His eyes never left mine. I nodded like it was all just fiction. Then I folded the page and slid it into my folder with the court paperwork. Another piece. Another breadcrumb. Around that time, I got a message from Mark, my old student turned freelance IT specialist. I told him I was organizing a timeline, tracking everything from Melissa's side of the separation, the paperwork she submitted, the dates, the documents, the emails. He'd been combing through metadata and online records for a couple weeks. When he finally called, he sounded puzzled. "You know that report Melissa submitted during mediation?" he asked. "The one that supposedly came from Tyler's school counselor? Jeremy?" "Yeah. Well, the timestamp on the original document says it was created on Melissa's laptop, not Jeremy's, and the IP matches her work-from-home connection." He paused, like waiting for me to react. I didn't. "Anything else?" I asked. "There's an edit logged 30 minutes later from a different machine, Jeremy's school-issued laptop. Looks like she drafted it, he finalized it." "Thanks, Mark." I didn't explain what that meant. I didn't have to, but it told me something I already suspected. They'd collaborated on that report. The same report that painted me as distant, possibly depressed, unstable. It wasn't just unethical. It was planned. Meanwhile, Melissa had stopped playing careful. Her social posts were back. Public again. Happy photos of Tyler and Jeremy building a treehouse, Melissa smiling beside them, captioned with things like, "Building our next chapter." Jeremy started showing up to school events. He stood next to Melissa like a placeholder, not a parent, but close enough for people to assume. I never said a word. I let them pose. I let them wave. But I kept track of every date those photos went up, every caption, every slip. Tyler was still listed as Melissa's dependent at school, but Jeremy had started signing things: field trip forms, lunch forms, teacher correspondence. Technically, he wasn't allowed. No legal standing. But no one questioned it. Not until I quietly asked the school to verify the signatures against the court order. I didn't do it directly. I sent my lawyer, who sent a routine inquiry asking for clarification. The school flagged it internally. Suddenly, Melissa's tone with the administration changed. I heard she'd sent a follow-up email blaming the confusion on shared household logistics. The school sent me a copy, another document for the file. She was starting to crack, but she didn't see it yet. Her confidence had gone too far. She thought she'd won, thought she'd replace me cleanly. But she was doing what people always do when they think no one's watching, getting careless. I started keeping a spreadsheet. Not for revenge, for clarity. At least, that's what I told myself. It listed every inconsistency in her story, dates she contradicted herself, messages that conflicted with agreements, school forms signed by the wrong person. Nothing dramatic. Nothing that screamed fraud or abuse. Just patterns. Patterns that someone impartial might find interesting, if it ever came to that. During one of our visits, Tyler told me something else. He said Jeremy had started calling him Buddy instead of his name. Said it made him feel weird, like Jeremy didn't want to learn who he really was, just wanted to sound nice. Then he said, "He doesn't listen the way you do." I looked at him and asked, "What do you mean?" Tyler shrugged. "You let me talk without trying to fix it." That stayed with me. The next visit, he brought another drawing. This one showed the robot dog again, but now it was standing in front of a house with two doors. One door had a speaker next to it. The other had wires going under it. Tyler pointed to the speaker and said, "That one hears what people want you to hear. The other one hears what they don't know they're saying." I nodded slowly. "Which one do you trust more?" He looked me in the eye. "Depends on who's listening." After that, I didn't wonder anymore. I knew he saw it. All of it. And he was keeping his own kind of score. Melissa missed another mediation call. Sent a last-minute excuse about a dental emergency. It didn't matter. I already had what I needed. She thought I was dormant. That's what happens when someone mistakes your silence for surrender. The final custody hearing was approaching. And this time, she wouldn't be the only one speaking. 2 weeks before the final hearing, Tyler's teacher called me. She didn't leave a message, just rang in the middle of the afternoon and asked if she had the right number. She sounded hesitant, like she was already regretting the call. I told her yes, it was me. She asked, "Are you the one helping Tyler with his showcase project?" I said yes. We'd been working on it together for weeks, rigging an old phone to act as a motion-triggered recorder, part of a home security concept Tyler had dreamed up. He was obsessed with building something that could hear what people really say when they think they're alone. I figured it was his way of processing things, so I encouraged it. We kept it simple, modular sensors, basic encryption, nothing elaborate. But he took it seriously. The teacher was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Melissa told us Jeremy had been working on it with him. That Jeremy designed the recording function." I didn't say much. Just, he didn't. She sighed through the phone. "I thought so. Thanks for clearing it up." That was all. No fireworks. But it stayed with me. Her tone, the decision to call me directly instead of forwarding the question through the usual channel. She knew something wasn't right. A few days later, Melissa posted a 15-second video. It was her, Jeremy, and Tyler in the backyard, laughing while hammering beams into what looked like the start of a treehouse. Harmless enough. But at the 3-second mark, right before Jeremy handed Tyler a drill, Melissa's voice came through off-camera, clear, careless. "Make sure we get a few good ones before Dan's lawyer starts asking questions again." She took the video down the next day, but it had already been viewed and saved. She never mentioned it. Neither did I. During our next visit, Tyler didn't say much. He worked on his project while I adjusted the wiring and helped troubleshoot a syncing issue. But just before we wrapped up, he handed me a flash drive. No words. Just held it out. I looked at it, then at him. "You sure?" He nodded. "Yeah." That was the first moment I knew for sure. He wasn't just watching anymore. He was choosing sides. The following week, the court-appointed evaluator hosted a final joint session. Melissa and I were both on the call. Vincent Cruz was there too, seated behind her, expression unreadable. The evaluator asked routine questions. How communication had been. If we'd maintained the co-parenting plan. Melissa smiled and spoke calmly about routine stability and emotional consistency. Then the evaluator asked Tyler a few direct questions. I watched closely. "What's something that's been hard lately?" she asked. Tyler blinked. looked at his hands, then said, "I don't like when people talk about my dad like he's not in the room." Melissa flinched just slightly, but it was enough to knock the mask loose. She shifted in her chair, glanced at Vincent. He didn't look back at her. His gaze stayed fixed on the floor. After the call ended, I got a message from the evaluator. Just one sentence. Tyler sees more than he says. The next shift came from inside the visitation center. Diane, the senior staffer who'd monitored my earliest visits, stopped me while I was signing out. She didn't lower her voice this time. "Just so you know," she said, "we've never had concerns about your sessions. Tyler's always calm with you. Present. Engaged." I said, "I appreciate that." She looked me in the eye. "That doesn't always match the notes we get from the other side." I didn't ask what she meant. I just thanked her and left. But her words followed me all the way to the car. At the next mediation prep meeting, Vincent didn't speak right away. Usually he opened strong, his tone firm, a little theatrical. This time, he hesitated before flipping open his binder. His eyes looked tired. Melissa, on the other hand, was composed as always. Beige blouse, minimalist jewelry, hands folded neatly in her lap. About halfway through the meeting, Vincent interrupted her mid-sentence. "Melissa, I need to clarify something with you again." She stopped talking, looked at him. "The counselor's report you submitted back in March. You told me it came directly from the school." "It did." "No," he said, this time more pointed. "It came through you, on a shared drive, with a metadata signature that doesn't match their network." There was a long silence. She didn't respond. Vincent pinched the bridge of his nose and muttered, "That's the second time I've had to clean this up." That was when I knew even her lawyer was starting to back away. He wouldn't say it outright, not yet, but he knew. He saw it unraveling. The last visit before the hearing, Tyler asked if he could run one final check on the project files. He plugged in his tablet, sorted through a few folders, then paused. "I added something," he said without looking up. "It's labeled." I waited. "It's not just tech stuff. I wanted someone else to have it, in case things get edited again." I didn't ask what he meant by edited. I just said, "Okay." He pulled out the flash drive and placed it back in my hand. It had a sticker on it now. His handwriting. For later. I didn't open it right away. I waited until the house was dark and the windows were locked. I plugged it into a clean device and watched it load. He'd compiled screenshots, audio logs, and labeled clips, all time-stamped. Nothing illegal. Just context. Full conversations. Captured naturally while testing his project. Unfiltered moments of Melissa and Jeremy speaking like no one was listening. I only watched one file. That was enough. The rest I sealed away. At the next procedural meeting, Melissa seemed relaxed. She smiled at the judge, made small talk with the court clerk, handed over a new copy of her co-parenting calendar with highlighted notes and printed timestamps. Everything looked polished, controlled. But I noticed the flash in her eyes when she glanced at Vincent, and he didn't return the smile. I didn't say anything, but I could feel it coming. Everything she'd built, the image, the narrative, the control, was beginning to lean, just slightly, under its own weight. Inside my folder was everything I'd collected, but under that, Tyler's file, labeled in his handwriting. I opened it once. That was enough. It was raining when I arrived at the courthouse. Nothing dramatic. Just steady enough to keep everyone's head down and moving quickly. I sat in the hallway outside the courtroom for 10 minutes before they called us in. Melissa walked in a minute after me, umbrella under her arm, hair perfectly dry. She gave Vincent a tight nod, but didn't say anything. He didn't say anything back. She sat 2 seats down from me at the respondent's table. Her blouse was cream, no jewelry today. A new watch, though sleek, expensive. Her folder was thick, color-coded, tabs sticking out every inch. She glanced at me once, then at the judge's bench. Not a flicker of concern. That told me what I needed to know. She thought today was a formality. The hearing opened with Vincent doing his usual routine. Timeline, documentation, predictable emphasis on stability, consistency, emotional continuity. But something was off. His voice didn't have the same pace. He stumbled once while citing the school reports. Melissa stiffened beside him. I watched her fingers tense under the table. She didn't move, but her whole body seemed to press into stillness. Then came our turn. My lawyer didn't posture. He never did. He spoke slowly, clearly. Just laid it out. Email discrepancies, timeline gaps, language inconsistencies between Melissa's statements to the school and the court. He passed out printed records, one by one. Not accusations, just facts. Facts she'd filed herself. The judge listened. She was attentive, calm, professional. But by the time my lawyer finished, her pen had stopped moving. Then came the part about emergency contacts. My lawyer passed the judge a printed email chain between Melissa and Tyler's school, the one where she'd listed Jeremy as Tyler's pickup without notifying anyone. A violation of the custody order. The judge asked for clarification. Melissa spoke for the first time. I misunderstood the form. I thought I could designate a household member as long as I was primary. The judge looked back down at the paper. You did not notify Mr. Harper of this. No, but it was a non-issue. Tyler was never picked up by Jeremy alone. Vincent didn't look up. He kept his hands folded. Then came a moment that surprised everyone. The judge asked if Tyler wanted to speak, alone or in open court. The liaison looked at him. Tyler nodded. The judge smiled gently. You may come forward. Tyler stood up slowly, walked up with his backpack, and sat at the small table near the bench. The judge asked him simple questions. How he was feeling. What life was like between households. If he felt safe, heard, supported. He answered honestly. Not rehearsed, not dramatic. Just like himself. Then the judge asked, Is there anything else you'd like to share? Tyler hesitated. Then he reached into his backpack, pulled out his tablet, and placed it on the table in front of him. There's something I need to play. Melissa's entire body turned toward him. Tyler. The judge raised her hand. Let him continue. He tapped the screen. It started with Melissa's voice. Just say it was Jeremy's idea. Dan won't know. He never pushes back. Then Jeremy's. If we keep it simple, the school won't flag anything. They don't check metadata. Melissa stood halfway, mouth open, as if to object, but Vincent put a hand on her arm. She froze. Another clip played, shorter. Melissa again. If Tyler ever asks questions, just tell him his dad gets overwhelmed sometimes. He's used to hearing that. No one moved. Then the final one. Jeremy. This whole co-parenting thing is just a stage. He'll fade out eventually. We're the stable ones now. Silence. The judge's face stayed composed, but her eyes were locked on Melissa. She turned to Tyler. Did you make these recordings intentionally? Tyler nodded. It was part of a school project. But I saved these because I didn't want people thinking my dad was the problem. He wasn't. Melissa finally spoke again. Voice thin, like she was trying not to shake. Your Honor, this is being taken entirely out of. The judge cut her off. Miss Harper, please sit. Melissa looked toward Vincent, maybe expecting him to recover the moment. He didn't look at her. He reached down, closed his folder, and folded his hands in his lap. She reached for her own file, one of the colored tabs, and a few pages slipped out. She moved to grab them, but her hand stopped halfway. She just sat there, papers on the floor, lips pressed shut. The judge didn't call for a ruling yet. She said she'd review everything, especially the submitted audio, and issue a written decision within 72 hours. Her tone was polite, but final. We stood. Melissa didn't move right away. Tyler walked back to the liaison's desk, packed up his tablet. He didn't glance at his mother. On the way out, she reached for him, just a hand on his arm. He stopped. I didn't mean for you to hear all that. He looked at her for a long second, then said, I did. That was all. He turned and walked back toward me, not fast, not slow, just steady. Outside, the rain had stopped. The sidewalk glistened. Melissa didn't come out right away. Vincent left without saying a word. We stood by the curb for a moment. Tyler slung his backpack over one shoulder and looked up at me. Are you okay? He asked. I am now, I said. He gave a small nod. Not a smile, just an acknowledgement. Then we got in the car. I didn't look back at the courthouse. The hearing wasn't over yet, but Melissa's version of the story was. 3 days after the hearing, the ruling arrived. Certified mail, courthouse envelope, Tyler's name on the front. I set it on the table, unopened, and let it sit there for a while. Not because I was nervous, because I already knew. When I finally opened it, the wording was sterile, professional distance, legal structure. But in between the lines, it was clear I was awarded primary custody. Full legal decision-making. Tyler would live with me. Melissa was granted structured visitation, alternate weekends, neutral drop-offs, ongoing monitoring through the parenting coordinator. There was no reprimand, no formal rebuke in writing, But the judge's silence said more than a statement ever could. The part that mattered most was this: child preference considered with supporting evidence. Primary parent determined based on demonstrated emotional consistency and credibility. She never saw it coming. But the court wasn't the only place she lost. The science fair was a week later. Tyler had been working on his project for months. He cleaned up the design, rewrote his code, practiced his presentation so many times I could recite it myself. He stood next to his table, in front of a crowd of parents and teachers. Wearing a collared shirt, he insisted on ironing himself. His prototype worked perfectly: motion trigger, data logging, time-stamped audio capture. All explained in his own words. Simple, clean, precise. He won first place. While they were handing him the ribbon, I noticed two PTA moms near the snack table. One of them leaned toward the other and said, just loud enough, "That's her kid, right? Melissa's? She didn't show?" The other woman shook her head. "Haven't seen her in weeks." I glanced across the room. Jeremy was there, off to the side, pretending to check his phone. Alone. A few parents nodded at him, but no one started a conversation. One father nudged another and whispered something while pointing his way. They both shook their heads. When the event ended, Tyler and I walked out into the parking lot under dim field lights. He climbed into the passenger seat, tossed his backpack into the back, and looked straight ahead for a few seconds before speaking. "I didn't think she'd stay away." "Neither did I said. He nodded, slowly. "Guess you were right. Some people don't change. They just fade." We drove in silence for a bit, but it wasn't heavy. It felt finished. What I never told Melissa, and what no one else needed to know, was that none of this was spontaneous. I never just hoped things would fall apart for her. I built it, quietly, over months, through paperwork, patience, and a steady line of facts. I didn't react when she tried to control the narrative. I didn't post. I didn't beg. I didn't spiral. But I documented everything. When she submitted the counselor's letter supposedly written by Jeremy, I didn't accuse her. I cross-referenced the metadata and filed a motion for document verification. That's when the judge saw the IP address was her home network. When Melissa tried to change the pickup times to accommodate Jeremy's schedule, I didn't argue. I forwarded the signed court schedule to the school and waited for the email thread to circle back to her. Even the visitation logs, the ones from the family center, showed Tyler entering calm, focused, happy. Those were neutral reports. All I did was keep them in a file. The certification course I took wasn't random either. I enrolled 3 weeks after Melissa served the divorce papers. A crash course in digital record management and legal data admissibility. Online, 2 nights a week. I didn't need a degree. I just needed to understand how to make every move count, without noise. But the best move I never made? Convincing Tyler of anything. He figured it out on his own. The flash drive he gave me, the one labeled for later, wasn't just a project file. There was a folder at the bottom, password protected, but he'd told me the phrase weeks earlier during a visit. "It hears what they don't know they're saying." That was the password. Inside were time-stamped recordings, yes, but also screen recordings of Melissa coaching him on what to say during evaluations. Clips of her telling Jeremy how to word emails. Even a photo of a document on her laptop, open to a draft of a school statement Jeremy later submitted. None of it was faked. All of it was real. And I didn't use most of it. I didn't need to. The judge only heard the 3 cleanest audio clips. That was enough to shift perception, to create the moment where everyone stopped seeing me as the unstable one and started asking questions about her. And that moment, when it hit, was exactly how I wanted it. Melissa looking to Vincent, expecting him to recover the narrative, and seeing his hands stay folded. Jeremy shrinking near the school gym wall, ignored by the same parents who used to invite him to lead discussion circles. The school principal forwarding me a thank you email after the fair. "You've handled everything with such grace. Tyler's lucky to have you." And Tyler, standing on stage, ribbon in hand, shoulders straight, eyes steady. That was the moment I knew I'd won. Not the custody ruling. Not the quiet exits. That. Back at home, while unpacking a few boxes I'd put off sorting since the move, I found something in a folder I hadn't touched in years. A sealed envelope. Melissa's handwriting on the front, for someday. Inside were old prints, photos of Tyler as a toddler, his first Halloween costume, beach snapshots, all from a time before things fell apart. Back when we were still pretending everything was fine. I didn't burn it. I didn't throw it away. I sealed it back up and slid it into a drawer. Because I'm not angry anymore. She did what she thought she had to do. But she forgot one thing. People don't remember the story you tell them. They remember what they saw. And what they saw, in the end, was her.